Hello and welcome to my channel. So today I'll be talking about the cranial cavity, its contents, and mainly the meninges. So as we know, the cranial cavity mainly houses the cranial cavity contains brain, and also it contains a lot of other things associated with the brain, like the brain. Not only the brain, cranial meninges, space between the meninges, which could be the dural venous sinuses, cerebrospinal fluid, ventricles, cranial nerves, arteries, and as I said, the spaces between the meninges, which are known as the venous sinuses, as well. So the brain is housed by the its roof, which is known as the skull cap or the calvaria, and it is formed by the superior aspect of the frontal, parietal, and the occipital bones. So it has sutures, the the sulcuses, not only the sagittal sulcus but also the um, formed by the superior aspects of the bones like the frontal, parietal, and occipital bones, and it has like a sagittal sulcus, which could be the inferior and the superior sagittal sulcus, granular pits, vascular grooves, parietal foramina, impression of the gyri. So over here we can see the contents of the, sorry, not the contents of the brain, but over here we can see the space created by the dural fold, which is the dural venous sinuses, the veins, dura mater. This is the dura mater, cerebral vein, emissary veins, and all these present here. So over here we can even see the granular pits, which are formed by the arachnoid granulation. Over here, these are the granular pits. These are formed by the arachnoid granulation or the arachnoid villi, which I'll be explaining in when I start explaining the meninges. The second meninge, arachnoid matter, meningeal layer. When I start explaining the second meningeal layer, which is the arachnoid matter, parietal bone, the superior aspect. So the calvaria contains, as I said, the superior part of the frontal bone, the sagittal suture, sagittal sulcus over here, the coronal suture, and it has the parietal bone. This is the parietal bone and the occipital bone. So all these form the calvaria or the skull cap, the frontal aspect, parietal aspect, and the occipital aspect. So talking about the meninges now. So there are three meninges: the outer hard dura mater, middle arachnoid matter, and the inner pia mater. So talking about the dura mater's literal translation from the Latin means hard mother, which is also which literally means the hard covering. So we can say that dura mater is the outermost membrane of the brain, which is close to the skull and vertebrae. As we know, the spinal cord also has the meningeal layers, so it is continuous through the foramen magnum, and it also forms a spinal meningeal layer around the spinal cord. And it is the thickest durable membrane, supports and surrounds large dural sinuses. So the dura mater has mainly two layers: the outer endosteal layer and the inner meningeal layer. So I'll make a rough diagram over here. Let's think that this is the dura mater. So this is the outer endosteal layer, which is continuous with the calvaria or the periosteum of the skull, or we can say the periosteum of the bone. And over here, this is the inner meningeal layer, which is closely associated with the other layers like the arachnoid matter, pia mater. This is the inner meningeal layer of the dura mater. So it has two layers mainly, the outer layer and the inner layer. And sometimes there is a space formed between the outer dura mater layer, the outer endosteal layer and the inner meningeal layer. These are known as the dural venous sinuses. This space created over here is known as the dural venous sinus. So there is a clear diagram over here. Over here we can see the meningeal layers, dura mater, So this is the outer periosteal layer, which is closely associated with the bone or the periosteum, and this is the inner layer of the dura mater. This is the complete dura mater, inner meningeal layer of the dura mater. So as I said before, the space formed by the dura mater between the outer periosteal layer and the inner meningeal layer of the dura mater, it creates a space called sinus, which is known as the dural venous sinus. Okay, so we can say that the outer endosteal layer or the internal periosteum endocranium for the skull bones, it provides a sheath for the cranial nerves as well, adherent to the inner surface of the skull by fibrous vascular processes, and it continues as the periosteum on the outside of the skull bones. So the inner meningeal layer is a fibrous membrane. It's closely associated with the brain or close to the brain, and also extends from foramen magnum and also contributes to the formation of the dura mater of the spinal cord as well. So over here we can see dura mater, which is the meningeal layer. It continues down, comes out of the foramen magnum, continues as the dural meningeal layer of the spinal cord. Hello everyone. So today I'm talking about the meningeal layers of the brain. So mainly there are three meningeal layers: outer dura mater, middle arachnoid mater, and inner pia mater. So talking about the dura mater, dura mater's literal translation from Latin means hard mother. So we can say that it is the outermost membrane which is hard, close to the skull and vertebrae, as we know that the spinal cord also has meningeal layers. So it's continuous, it's related to skull and vertebrae. It's continuous from the foramen magnum as well, and it is the thickest durable membrane, supports the large dural sinuses, and has mainly two layers. The outer layer is continuous. Okay, so the outer layer is associated with the outer layer of the cranium or the periosteum, and the inner dural layer is known as the meningeal layer, which is associated with the brain and the other meninges. So over here you can see this is the dura mater, the outer surface of the outer periosteal layer, which is continuous with the bone and the periosteum of the cranium, and the inner layer of the dura mater, which is continuous with the other meninges and the brain, is closely associated or related to the brain. So the space made between the outer outer layer of the dura mater, outer periosteal layer, and the inner meningeal layer of the dura mater, it creates spaces which is known as the dural venous sinuses. So the spaces created are known as the dural venous sinuses. I will be talking about dural venous sinuses in another video. So we can say the outer endosteal layer is continuous with the endocrinium and provides sheath for the cranial nerves as well, and continues as periosteum on the outside of the skull bones. And inner meningeal layer is fibrous membrane close to the brain and extends from the foramen magnum and also forms the spinal dural mater, as I said earlier. Over here we can see it comes from the foramen magnum. This is the dura mater, comes out from the foramen magnum, extends through it, and is also continues with the spinal cord and forms the spinal dura mater as well. Over here it's more clear. This is the foramen magnum, base of the skull, dura mater, spinal dura mater. So the dura mater creates folds. The inner meningeal layer of the dura mater. This is the let us think this as the outer endosteal layer and the inner meningeal layer. So the inner meningeal layer creates inward foldings or the septa, These are known as the septa, and there are mainly 4 septas. And these septa's main function is to restrict the rotatory displacement or to minimize the displacement of the brain. So the four inward foldings we can say are the fox cerebri, tentorium cerebelli, fox cerebelli, and the diaphragma cellae. So talking about the fox cerebri, fox cerebri is sickle-shaped dural fold. It is the largest fold of the dura mater and occupies the medial longitudinal fissure. So we can see the sickle-shaped dural fold. Sickle-shaped dural fold. This is the fox cerebri, the largest fold. So this fold starts from the ethmoid bone, which is precisely speaking like the crista galli of ethmoid bone. From this region, it extends all over to the posterior region of the occipital bone, the occipital protuberance. So this is all the fox cerebri. As I said, anterior end is the crest of the frontal bone attached to the crista galli of the ethmoid bone. Posterior end, occipital protuberance. And upper margin attaches along the sagittal sulcus. This is the superior sagittal sulcus, and this is the inferior sagittal sulcus. So these are the sulci made by the inward foldings of the dura mater. Now talking about the tentorium cerebelli, it is the second largest fold of dura mater and has tent-like appearance. This separates the occipital lobes of cerebrum from the cerebellum. So I'm just making a rough diagram. If we think this is the brain and this is the occipital lobe, this is the cerebrum. So the tentorium cerebelli is like this. This is the dural fold and it makes a fold over here. Sorry, this is the fox cerebri, and the tentorium cerebelli creates a space and divides the complete cranial region into two. This is the supratentorial and this is the infratentorial region. So it separates the occipital lobes of cerebrum from the cerebellum, and it divides the complete cranial cavity into two compartments, which is the supratentorial and the infratentorial. This is the supratentorial region and the infratentorial region. Cerebri, which has a sickle shape, and its anterior end is seen at the ethmoid bone, to be precise, the crista galli of the ethmoid region, and posteriorly it has a posterior end which is seen at the occipital protuberance, and also it has two surfaces mainly, or the two margins, the superior and the inferior. The superior occupies the superior sagittal sinus or the sagittal sulcus, and inferior sagittal sulcus, and the inferior region margin occupies the inferior sagittal sulcus, which is just above the corpus callosum. And the lower margin has an attachment with the tentorium cerebelli, which is the second largest dural fold. So, as I said, fox cerebri is sickle-shaped, largest fold of the dura mater, occupies the medial longitudinal fissure, separates the cerebral hemispheres. Anterior end is it's attached to the crista galli of the ethmoid bone, is seen at the frontal region, crest of the frontal bone, and the posterior end is at the occipital protuberance. Upper margin attaches longitudinally on the sagittal sulcus. Here, this is the upper margin, and the lower margin lies above the corpus callosum. This lower margin. So talking about the tentorium cerebelli. Now the tentorium cerebelli, in this diagram we can see that the red marking over here, this is the tentorium cerebelli. So tentorium cerebelli is the second largest fold of the dura mater and it has tent-like appearance. So it separates the occipital region of the brain, cranium, or occipital region of the brain. It separates into two regions mainly, the cerebrum and the cerebellum. So I'll make a rough diagram over here. Let us think this is the cerebral region and this is the cerebellar region, and this is the completely occipital region. So the tentorium cerebelli, it separates the occipital region of the cerebrum from the occipital region of the cerebellum and creates two compartments mainly. The upper region of the tentorium is the supratentorial region, and the below and just below the tentorial fold is the intratentorial region. So the tentorium cerebelli over here we can see in this picture. This is the dural fold that we are talking about. Let me draw it in red. Yeah, this is the dural fold that we are talking about. It separates the occipital region. This is the complete occipital region. And above the tentorium is the supratentorial. Below it is the this is the intratentorial, and this is the supratentorial region. So it divides the cranial cavity into two compartments, supratentorial and the intratentorial region, and it has two margins and two surfaces. So talking about the margins and the surfaces of the tentorium cerebelli. So the anteriorly it has a U-shaped region, and its anterior attachment is seen at the anterior clinoid process of the sphenoid bone. It's more clearly, yeah, over here. This is the anterior clinoid process of the sphenoid bone. So it starts from here, tentorium cerebelli. Its anterior border is free. It has no attachments, and it is U in shape. And posteriorly, it is attached to the occipital region. This is the occipital bone, posterior-laterally attached to the occipital bone, and anterior-laterally it has attachment to the temporal region. So it has the inner free region and the outer attached margin. So there's a crossing point where these two regions cross, and this crossing point mainly has, and the point of the crossing is near the petrous portion of the temporal bone. Over here, it's more clear. This is the free margin, tentorium cerebelli's free border. This is all the tent-like appearance, completely tentorium cerebelli. And over here, the crossing of the free border and the attached border over here at the petrous part of the temporal bone has a piercing of the cranial nerve for the oculomotor nerve and the trigeminal nerve as well. So this is an important point to remember. Free and attached margin cross at the region of the apex of the petrous portion of the temporal bone, which is pierced by the oculomotor nerve and the trochlear nerve. So that was about the tentorium cerebelli. Now talking about Fox cerebelli. So Fox cerebelli is sickle-shaped again. This is a vertical folding and lies inferior to tentorium cerebelli. So over here in this picture we can see that this is the Fox cerebelli, or this region is the, let me draw it in red color. This region is the Fox cerebelli, and this separates the two cerebellar hemispheres. This is the cerebellum. These are the two cerebellar hemispheres which are separated by the Fox cerebelli. So it has two parts, mainly the base. It has two regions mainly, the base and the apex. The base is attached to the tentorium cerebelli. Over here, this is, let me draw it in. This is the tentorium cerebelli. The base is attached to the tentorium cerebelli, and the apex region is on the either sides of the foramen magnum. This is the foramen magnum, as you know. Okay. So now, talking about diaphragmacellae, the last fold, dural fold. So this is the smallest horizontal fold of the dura mater. It is circular in shape and forms root for the yeah. This is the diaphragmacellae, which is the smallest circular inward folding of the dura mater, and it has an upper aperture. This is an aperture for the stalk of the it has a central aperture for the stalk of the hypophysis, pituitary gland. So yeah. Over here in this picture, this is the enfolding of the dura mater for the stalk of the pituitary gland. So, to revise it all, this picture it shows exactly how the dural folds, the dural unfolding. Let us think this as the inner meningeal layer of the dura mater. This forms the dural folding, which is the fox cerebri between the two cerebral hemispheres, and this is the this is the tentorium cerebelli, separates the occipital region of the cerebrum from the occipital region of the cerebellum, and this is the separates the two cerebellar hemispheres. So, talking about the arachnoid matter, which is the second meningeal layer, so it is the middle element of the meninges, and it has a spider web-like appearance. Villi as well, arachnoid villi, which is known as arachnoid villi. It is avascular and transparent membrane composed of fibrous tissue. So most of the cerebrospinal fluid, the arteries and the veins are present in the arachnoid matter or emissary vein. This is mainly the dural venous sinus that is seen in this picture. But this is the arachnoid region, the red region. It has spiderweb-like appearance, the arachnoid matter, and it has arachnoid villi, which give the arachnoid granulations. And these granulations are known as arachnoid foveola, which we have seen in the starting over here. Arachnoid granulations, which form the granular pits. Yeah. And talking about the pia mater, or which is the tender mother translation. Latin's translation is tender mother, which is very intimate, or which has a very close connection to the brain, which is very closely associated with the brain, and also follows every enfolding of the brain, firmly adherent to the brain surface, and follows the brain's gyri and sulci. So, pia mater is very thin, delicate membrane composed of fibrous tissue, and it's an impermeable membrane, adheres to the surface of the brain and the spinal cord and follows the brain's contours, which are the gyri and the sulci. So the blood vessels, there's an important point to remember, which is the blood vessels entering the brain or the cranial region or the cortex, they have a tubular prolongation, which is known as the perivascular sheath. So the main region, like the main reason for the extension, main reason for this tubular prolongation um, is to dampen the pulsation of the arteries in the it's filled with CSF. It's to dampen the pulsation of the arteries. Here you can see pia mater is closely associated with the brain, and this is the glial membrane. Blood-brain barrier. So blood-brain barrier is another topic that I'll be talking about in another video.